Everyone, we're just getting started. Thank you for joining us. If you're just signing on, just getting YouTube going.
All right. I think we're up on everything.
All right, cool. Well, welcome to round 40.
40.
Wow, it's a, that's a lot. Doesn't feel like that many, but maybe it feels like more. But thanks for joining us. This is a Q&A session specifically for 034 Motorsport and our products. Feel free to ask anything about the company. Nate and I are happy to talk about our personal experience or opinions, and 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 certainly anything automotive related, anything that you've always wanted to know about, or if you'd like us to weigh in on any controversies, always happy to do that. And
Latest gossip.
we just like to be direct and truthful. We have a no BS approach, and we're making ourselves available to the community, to the market, to the customers, and so that you guys can get to know more about us. You can get to know about what drives 034 Motorsport. So we're not just this kind of invisible, unnamed product company that packs and ships orders. We're a lot more than that. We're enthusiasts. We have been for decades. We love what we do, and so we're here to talk about that. So feel free to post the questions in any of the formats that you're on. We're currently on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram, and we will be happy to get going. So
Yep.
let's see. We got questions rolling in already. There's a question, I think this is from last week, 4.0 T-mount ETA. We don't have one. However, I think if you've been following along in the saga, we did some testing on the first mounts that we got, and we didn't like something about them, and we'll go into the details. And so we did a partial redesign of the product, and I believe we're waiting to get the latest revision from our manufacturer, because we don't do casting and rubber vulcanization here in the building. And so once we test those thoroughly, we would move to release the product. But it's probably not going to be any sooner than this summer, unfortunately. We would like to release them as quickly as we can. However, it has to be the right product. And so we're a ways off.
Yeah, that's a pretty massive amount of tooling and
Yeah.
and manufacturing requirements for these.
These type of like OEM, density mounts like we do, they're not cheap and easy to do. If they were, you'd see a lot more of them. So it's not the kind of thing we could just throw in our CNC machine and have done in a couple days. So hang in there. We appreciate it. We're really sorry. We obviously want to release something just as bad as you want to get it. So let's see. Are there any updates to 2.0 T Stage 2 ECU TCU tunes available?
It kind of depends on which 2.0 T we're talking about here. MQB stuff, yes, we are still in active development on a number of those files. There are more and more updates that are hitting the server as well as the CARB certified files are going to be more and more populated up there. So,
We've been talking recently about adding more features.
There's going to be a lot more stuff coming for the MQB as well. So I'm assuming this is MQB related, and in which case, yes, there's quite a bit more coming.
Look for some great updates this year. Of course, if you already own the files, you'll get those for free.
Right.
That was Gen.
If it's Gen 1, it's there's some
Mark 5, Mark 6.
Yeah, Mark 5, Mark 6. There's some as needed. We haven't done a lot of development on that in some time. They're pretty solid files as they are.
They are really good files, but it's unfortunately a shrinking market.
Yeah.
So for us to dedicate a lot of engineering resources to that, but certainly if there's any new features or functionality that we feel we can port over into those files without too much engineering work, then we will do it. And again, we'll announce that to any current customers. And again, that's always free. All right. Do you make a tune for the ZF8? And what are benefits, and does it improve 0 to 60 in quarter million times?
The ZF8, so that's the automatic 8-speed transmission in like the A6, A7, and Q5, SQ5. We have essentially it's a beta or an early release file out right now. So it's not finalized, but yes, it does increase 0 to 60 and quarter mile times. Just in that, the biggest change is that we allow faster shifts, but also higher RPM shift points. So a lot of that extra power in the supercharged tunes is right at the basically at red line.
Yeah.
So we allow you to sweep all the way to near that. We're going to have files that are going to have a little higher shift point than we have now. Most of what's up is either 7,000 or 7,200.
Yeah.
But that's up from like 6,400 stars.
Yeah, and it should improve 0 to 60. Certainly, the 1-2 shift if it's faster.
Yep.
Will help with that.
Yep.
And now's a great time to get in on our beta file. It's about half price of what it will be.
Yes.
And it's actually a really good file. It's just not exactly where we want it, and we're still making changes and taking feedback from customers. So if you want to jump in now, you'll get the full production version and any updates in the future as they come out for free. If you're running with E40 with upgraded pump, can you switch to 91 and E40 at any time without changing the pump and reflashing? How easy is it to switch back and forth between octanes?
So this is a 3-liter question, I'm assuming here. Yes, you can. You don't need to switch a pump to run 91 or E40. Once you've got the pump installed, you're fine to switch back and forth between the two. That's no problem at all. That would be a nightmare if you had to go back and forth with the hardware and the tune all the time. As far as how easy is it? I mean, going from E40 to 91's a little easier. You just run the tank down and pump 91 in, flash the 91 map, and you're basically good to go. Going 91 to E40, you want to be a little more careful because the transition to the E40 file and going up in octane, you want to make sure you're getting E40 at the motor. So we generally recommend that you've got an ethanol content analyzer and wait till that's E40, E40 plus before you then flash the E40 file. But other than that,
I'd say if you're going to run any kind of E40, anything blended, even if you're going to run E85, not that we offer a file for that, you want to get the gauge. I mean, it's like under $400. You can get into them for even a couple $100.
Yep.
And it's really important before you double the power of your engine that you have the right fuel on there. And it's so cheap and easy to verify.
A lot is riding on it. And
it's everything.
The octane difference between an E40 blend and a straight 91 blend and how they perform is just it's dramatic, and you cannot run an E40 file on a 91.
You'll blow your mind.
Yeah, on a 91, 93, or even 100 file. It's a lot more ignition advance allowable and with the ethanol.
Spend the $200-300 and a little bit of time to kind of take out that potentially disastrous variable.
Yep.
Someone's asking, will you be doing a cast billet throttle body inlet for the DAZA like APR's new kit? I think we did mention this last week. It's a little bizarre that APR's new kit doesn't even list any power gains or advantages. So I'm not sure why you would spend $600 on that if they can't even show that it makes more power. We haven't, frankly, seen a lot wrong with the stock throttle body inlet.
Oh, no.
The Malakas did some testing, and they were able to verify some gains there with their dyno testing. These aren't big gains. They're maybe another 10 or 15 wheel or something like that. So we don't currently have plans to do it. We are releasing a turbo inlet, which we've seen good solid gains from, and it allows also.
Yeah, the turbo inlet is certainly restricted. We've got lots of pressure drop data and dyno data around that.
Yeah, but I mean, for $700-800 currently, I would say look at the Malaka Motorsports product if you're interested in going that direction.
Yeah, I was just trying to see if they had any updated data. They've got some flow numbers, but nothing.
Yeah, I mean, flow numbers are nice, but I mean, they have like 6 dynos at APR. I mean, they can't just. They've got a bunch of RS3s there, so a little bizarre. But anyways, we don't currently have plans, and generally, I would say look elsewhere for power gains.
If we find a burning need for it, it'll be when we do some back-to-back testing on it and find there's enough benefit to justify the product, we'll jump into it. We haven't yet.
Yeah, I can certainly say the section of intercooler piping below that they replace is not a restriction either. It's a relatively straight piece. So, asking about the new Briss spark plugs, what is the recommended interval for service?
That's always a tough one with this because I mean, these are in such high output applications. Your service intervals are going to be very use dependent.
It's very, very use dependent, absolutely. And if you drive the car a lot or you don't, if they get carboned up from a lot of short drives, that's gonna. Or if you just for a few moments have a really rich fuel mixture, you can soot up your spark plugs really bad. So I would say generally these should have a similar life to OEM. However, again, even OEM plugs don't last 100,000 miles when you've doubled the output.
Yeah.
So I would say either replace them at an interval that makes you feel comfortable based on your experience, or certainly the moment that you sense that you have any misfire issues.
Yes, and
It's
these,
generally
these are I don't know even what application we're asking about. These are
yeah.
kind of across the board for motors and outputs. So yeah, I mean, I would say it's probably going to be a little better than a normal copper plug.
Definitely.
And in between, like an iridium plug.
Yeah.
The iridiums are generally a little longer life, but at a compromise of spark energy for the mixtures.
So we talk about spark plugs on here regularly, and our kind of take on spark plugs has always been run OEM unless we say differently.
Yep.
Like for example, some of the turbo kits we offer, we do include different plugs with that kit, and then we do sell those plugs on our site.
Yeah.
But recently we started talking about these Brisk spark plugs here. It's a spark plugs. There's not much to look at.
Fancy.
But we're carrying the Brisk racing plugs and the Brisk silver plugs. These are long life, high performance spark plugs, but we're not here to say that they're going to give you a lot more powerful spark. The nice thing is they offer a lot of options for heat ranges.
Yes, that is kind of the biggest reason. Is there's a lot of flexibility.
Yeah.
For given sizes and heat ranges, which actually leads into another question that came up. What does it mean to go hotter or colder on plugs?
Yeah. So, we could talk about spark plugs for a few seconds. Some diagrams would help. But basically, there's a few things about a spark plug that make it hotter or colder. A big thing is you can see there in the middle of the spark plug, there's the electrode, which is what the grounding strap ionizes with when you get the spark. And so that electrode is mounted on a ceramic post. And that post travels down into the spark plug some distance. Now, the ceramic post allows heat to conduct into the body of the spark plug and eventually out of the spark plug into the cylinder head. The size and length of that post is mostly what determines the heat range of that plug.
Yeah, and then there's also an amount that post is shrouded by the metal body of the plug itself.
Sure, right. Yeah. But what happens is a really hot plug will have relatively low conduction of heat out of the electrode. And so what happens is that electrode starts glowing red hot. And that plug with the glowing red hot electrode will begin propagating combustion sooner than a cooler electrode. Now, that can be good in cases where you need to start the spark sooner, you need more hotter spark energy or more aggressive
Sparking. A
sparking.
little bit of assist for that spark.
Yeah. But if you're already right at the edge of detonation or essentially dieseling of the air-fuel mixture, then you want full control over when that combustion starts, and that's when you want to move to a cooler plug that doesn't start combustion until the coil starts releasing energy. And so what we're recommending is that generally speaking, we're not saying you have to or it's 100% make or break, but we're recommending these Brisk spark plugs for stage 2 or higher applications, and we're offering plug options that are 1 to 2 heat ranges cooler than the factory plug. Again, these are more stressed applications, higher combustion pressure, closer to the detonation limit. And so we're bringing the heat of the plug back a little bit to give the ECU and ignition coil more control over when combustion starts. Again, we're not here to say that's going to be a hotter spark or you're going to get a bigger explosion.
Yep.
The spark plug's job is to start combustion, but the bulk of combustion and how it propagates through the combustion chamber is controlled by the air-fuel mixture And the characteristics of the motor.
The chamber design, the
Yeah,
piston design.
how air is flowing in and out of the combustion chamber, if there's any swirl, how well the air and fuel are mixing. Again, the air fuel ratio is really key to that. And then the timing is critical. So when you start the spark is more important than how big the spark is. And the reason I make this point is the spark plug isn't determining the size or power of the combustion. Again, that's all those other things, mostly related to the air fuel mixture. But the key to a good spark plug isn't how much spark, but when and how. And so that's what these plugs give you.
Yep. As long as you're lighting it off and you're getting a proper combustion event,
it has to start at
the right time. The right time. That's not up to the plug.
I mean, imagine a big domino. The dominoes, you see those on. The spark plug is the thing that knocks the first domino down. The rest of it's a combustion propagation process.
Yep.
The spark plug's not like releasing all this heat and energy into the combustion chamber to make the combustion bigger. Yeah. If you can't start the combustion, that's your real issue, and that's where a good spark plug with the right heat range, the right kind of tuning is by far 99% of what makes a spark plug.
Yeah, and following that up there, this person was asking if it would benefit their stock and or tuned setup. Stock motor, you're basically never going to need or notice.
We don't recommend it. I mean, you can do it.
It's not going to
You're not going to see any benefit or gain other than.
And then, as Joe mentioned, for the tune motors, you start pushing the limits of what you can light off with stock plugs is when you want to start looking at the big performance stuff.
So and again, we have two different models: the Brisk Racing and the Brisk Silver, and they both feature a silver electrode. Now, Nick Scambaluri, who's been with us since the fall, one of the things he said that he's seen with these plugs, and he has quite a bit of experience with them, which we have really trusted his experience and expertise with these, is that actually a good thing about the silver electrode is that it has a relatively low melting point compared to something like iridium. So if there is something
much lower,
if you are having combustion that's too hot, your EGTs are higher than they should be, that could damage the motor. In many cases, he's seen the electrode actually melt away and prevents further damage.
It just shuts off that.
So it acts as in a way as a fuse. So we're kind of coming at this from the opposite way. A lot of companies it has a melting point and won't ever melt.
We haven't actually tested that. That's anecdotal, but
his experience, which we trust, is that that could actually help act as a safety feature. So again, no guarantee that
it's going to prevent. Let's not lean on that,
but it's just an added thing, and like Nate said, anecdotally. So check them out on our website. There's more details. I think you'll find that we've probably posted more information about these plugs than anyone else that sells them. We've listed them at a competitive price. You can buy these lots of places, but we like to bring products like this to customers when we feel like it could be beneficial.
Yep.
And to not, blow a bunch of smoke about what things that they don't actually do. All right, next question. What's the benefit of doing a DSG tune on a tuned B8S4? Well, there are many.
The stock transmissions, DSG transmissions, have a pretty low torque limit with what they'll allow the ECU to properly report and send to the transmission. The transmission will actually start reducing the amount of power that the engine's allowed to make. In ye olden days, lots of tuners would get around that by just faking the output to the transmission, and then you don't need a TCU tune to make all this engine power. That correlates though to pretty poor shift quality, because you're kind of lying to the transmission as to how much power you're making. Therefore, the transmission doesn't know how to hold that much power and then deal with the shift. So that's where you'd see a lot of these videos where you're going up through the gears. As you change gears, you see the RPMs kind of fluctuate before they grab finally, and then that's rampant still on a lot of files that are out there. But TCU tune, if it's done properly, will help you control all of that as it should be. So you can give the TCU all the amount of torque from the engine that it's actually making, and then properly control the clutches
Yeah, I mean,
for that amount of torque. So, and then that's just the basics to even get the power to hold. And then you also get the increased launch RPMs, shift points, rev limits, shift speed. So there's some fundamental fixes that the TCU tune is required for, and then there's all the performance goodies you get with it.
yeah. I mean, it's really cool. The DSG, as we've discussed before, is an active clutch. You can program it to give more or less clamping force when you need it.
Yep.
With a manual transmission, you literally have to unbolt the transmission, remove it from the car, unbolt the clutch, in many cases the flywheel as well, and then increase the stiffness of the spring diaphragm and the pressure plate.
Yeah.
And that now just seems like the Stone Ages compared to just going into the ECU and literally asking the ECU to hold more power. So,
And usually with trade-offs in your leg effort
Oh, gosh.
and driving.
what the manual setup, yeah, there's huge compromises you have to make. So
we don't need to go down that path.
Yeah. This is a great question. Folks, why are most of your suspension products for the Mark 6 are for the rear axle and almost nothing is available for the fronts? Kind of related, what do you do about non-adjustable front camber on that car? So,
Hey, there we
is
go.
this like a planted question?
No,
Really?
amazing.
Well, we're here to tease this new product, and it is for the Mark 5 and Mark 6 vehicles specifically. Now, I'll qualify, if you have a TTRS with
Not MagRide.
with MagRide, unfortunately, this will not work for you because this is an all aluminum product and it shorts out the
Yeah, it actually interferes with the MagRide circuitry.
circuit. So if you have aftermarket shocks on your TTRS that aren't MagRide, then it would work. But certainly, most of the GTIs and Golfs are not MagRide.
There's some Mark 6
Yeah,
might
maybe.
be.
But anyways, so this is a new version of our fixed camber mount, and you might see how this spring hat is offset from the center. Normally, the factory mount, this would all be centered. So by doing this, we're moving the top of the shock inboard and giving an additional. It's about 2.5 degrees of camber. Now, it doesn't make your camber adjustable; it's fixed, which is kind of the beauty of it. If you go to the track, you can put them in and then take them back out, and you don't have to necessarily fiddle with adjusting them. They are a solid strut mount design, so unlike our MQB fixed camber mounts that have a rubber isolator strut mount inside, we were not able to fit anything like that due to the constraints of this mount. However, this is a great way to get more fixed camber in your Mark 5, Mark 6 GTI. We should be releasing these in the next month or two. All the testing is done, the engineering is done, and we're simply producing this as a production part, right? So look for a release on these. And then related, so many of you know about our fixed camber mount. I don't know if you can see anything interesting here, but this is where the spring hat sits, and this is where the strut goes. It's no longer centered in both axes, so it's now off to one side, and this is now a fixed camber and caster mount. So we're doing a trade-off. We're getting rid of a little bit of the camber you would normally get with our camber mounts, and we're giving you additional caster. The benefit of caster is your camber curve as your wheel turns and as your suspension compresses, and so the increased caster takes away some of the static camber, but it gives you back more camber dynamically when you actually want it and need it. And so we found that this is a great trade-off. This is also a pre-production part, and we will be releasing these soon, so keep an eye out. This fits basically all the classic MQB applications. Still has the rubber strut mount in there. NVH increases is minimal with this product, although there is some. You're going to notice more NVH from the solid Mark 5, Mark 6 mount simply because it's 100% metal. So you're going to gain some advantage as far as things flexing and deflecting, but you will notice just more of the road noise coming through the front suspension. But again, it's not going to turn your car into a race.
What suspension you got, but yeah,
It's not going to affect the ride quality so much. It's just those high frequency sounds will come through without being dampened by rubber. those are on the near horizon. We're excited for these products, and feel free to spread the word. We'll be releasing them soon.
Yep.
All right, next question. What's your recommendation for pads on a B9 S4 for track use? Well, we did offer our own line of Cobalt brake pads for about a year, and we just found that it wasn't a very popular product. We weren't selling enough of them to justify them taking up the space in the warehouse, and there's a lot of good options on the market. Generally, we don't sell a lot of pads, but I would recommend Padgett pads. We've always had good luck with Padgett, and I do believe that they have some B9 applications now. There's a lot of good pads out there. I'm not crazy about the EBC stuff. I mean, I think they're good street pads. I don't think they make a track pad.
Yep.
I think some of their verbiage oversells, unfortunately, the product. They're good like fast road pads.
Yeah,
With light track use.
Like when we're talking pads, there is no real street and track pad.
There is.
You're doing one or the other. If you see anything that's branded as both, it's a street pad.
That's a really good point. And yeah, it's
you're gonna compromise some street drivability
Yeah.
and dust and noise and that with a proper trackpad because it's just designed to operate at a much higher temperature.
Yeah,
streets.
it's kind of like, like the Tinder app saying it's a great place to meet your wife or something like that. They just don't do both at the same time. So, but yeah, what other brands out there? Ferodo's good.
Yeah, Hawk's got some race stuff.
I like Hawk stuff.
I actually just ran some Hawk stuff at the last event on V8.
The Hawk 9012, the blues. It's a very good pad, very aggressive. The nice thing about some of these pads,
Hawk Blues are
the Hawk
pretty
blues do something really well, where they have incredible initial bite when they're cold, and that also holds up when they get hot. So one thing you'll notice from racing pads is that some out there can do almost nothing when they're cold. You hit the pedal, it almost feels like you have no brakes for the first few seconds.
Yep.
And they have to really heat up to get the friction coefficient up. But the Hawk Blue, I don't know what's in those pads, but they have incredible cold bite. Anything you guys like?
PFC makes a really
Yep.
good
PFC makes really good
Performance
performance
friction.
friction.
Pad. It's, 10% brake pedals, 10% brake.
Which compounds?
PFC 08 is pretty good on that. So
PFC 08 or aggressive. Yeah, and this is the other thing.
And I also ran oh god, no, the name just escaped me. XR12s. Carbotex. I had good luck with Carbotex. Yep.
So I would recommend anyone looking for pads. I mean, pads aren't that expensive. A couple $100. Get some different ones, try them out, see what you like. Read the company's descriptions. Again, I would stay away from EBC for aggressive track use.
Yeah.
The other problem you're going to run into is rotors and cooling.
Mm-hmm.
So we are coming out with some rotor upgrades for the B9 platforms. I know right now we have RS5 coming, and we're looking at S4 as well. But the big problem with Audis, you get to a point where there's just not enough airflow going to the brakes. And so no matter what you do with it, the heat just has nowhere to go. So that's where getting into things like brake ducting can really help. Unfortunately, not a lot of great products on the market.
And it's really tough when you got Audis in there.
Audis aren't as easy to do as a front-wheel drive or rear-wheel drive BMW. So, anywho, but yeah, I just recommend getting out there, try some different stuff, see what you like, and be wary of, as Nate said, anything that says it's a good track and street pad. Be very wary of that. There's really no such thing, unless you want to drive on the street with a racing pad.
Yeah, you can drive on the street with some racing pads and get enough bite that it's a drivable setup.
Yeah.
But you're gonna
If you can live
it
with,
usually sounds like you're dropping anchor at every stoplight,
Yeah.
and you've got a lot of dust and whatnot that you're dealing with as well.
if you can live with the cold performance issue that I was describing, you're going to be dealing with a lot of squeaking, and the worst thing is the dust. And I'm not talking about how your car will look dusty. Like this is actually metal going on your paint, and it can really damage your
Depending on the
paint.
pads, yeah. Some
You have to
some when they're cold also are very abrasive to your discs. So
And then
you
you'll
can
you'll
chew
go
up
through
pieces.
rotors that crazy. Like it'll reduce your rotor life by at least half, possibly more. So, like Hawk Blues, I think you'd you'd maybe go a couple thousand miles on rotors before you need to replace.
They're like cheese graters for rotors
Yeah.
when they're cold. Are two-piece rotors needed for the B8S4 on a track setup? No, you need bigger brakes in general. The B8S4,
Sometimes the advantage of a good two-piece rotor though is it has better. Better airflow
it can help a
and
bit,
cooling.
but
Yeah.
yeah, they're pretty small brakes for that.
Oh, the B9S4 is a lot better. The B9A4.
The B9s are better. The
Yeah.
B8.
Oh, B8s.
This is
Yeah.
B8.
Only B8.
Yeah, this is B8. B9s are definitely better.
Yeah. No, the B8S4 you gotta get bigger brakes. They're just too small. You know.
I tried a bunch of different pads and different rotors, different options, and it wasn't enough.
Yeah, like stock B9S4 now are like 14-inch.
They're a lot more brake than what
Even like
it's
the RS4 had 11-inch brakes. Like this big.
yes,
On a 4,000 pound
14-inch wheels or 15-inch wheels.
Yeah. How does the B8.5 rear sway bar help with handling? Great question. So, what we offer for that car is just a rear bar upgrade, and that's because in our testing we found that the car needed more rear sway bar, which made the car tends to oversteer more the more rear sway bar roll stiffness you got. By stiffening up the front sway bar, you could reduce body roll, but it would cause the car to push more. And that was something very specific we found with that platform. When you install the rear bar, you'll notice right off the bat you'll have less body roll in general. But the other thing that really improves handling, body roll is not great for handling, but it's kind of more of an aesthetic thing. What you'll notice is when you go into a corner, certainly if you just go into a corner, turn, and lift off the throttle, you're going to find that the rear end will want to slide out or come. The car's not going to spin or flip necessarily, depending. If you do this too aggressively, you'll spin any car. But when you come into the corner and you breathe off that throttle a little bit, the car is going to turn in more. So that the front of the car will have more traction and it will steer more towards the steering input that you're giving it. Without it, you go in a corner and you do that, and you're just going to have to keep turning the steering wheel more trying to get through the corner, and that's called understeer. So you're going to really love it. This is an upgrade that will benefit any car for any driver. Will appreciate it. It'll make your car faster through corners, more fun to drive. It'll make the car feel like you have sharper steering because the car will actually turn when you turn the steering wheel versus push. So give it a try and let us know what you think. It's not a super expensive modification, but a huge bang for the buck. All right, someone's asking, what recommended interval would you recommend for carbon cleaning on the 3.0T supercharged motor? This is
They're
not
not nearly as bad as
Yeah.
some of the others. The 2 liters and then some of the high revving V8s are notoriously bad. The 3 liters we've
you don't
done,
hear about
we've
it.
only had to do a handful of them here, and they were like on the old A6 with the real early PCV systems. I'm trying to think if we've even done a.
I mean, I think
many
we
of the
do them,
later
but
ones.
not like the
It's-
the B7 RS4.
I mean, this kind of goes. I don't have a good interval to
Yeah.
recommend on that offhand.
It's not as problematic as it is for other applications, probably thanks to the forced induction.
There are PCV issues with them. If your PCV is going and you're getting a bunch of oil vapor and
Right.
oiling into the intake, that'll rapidly increase the rate of the carboning up on those valves.
But I mean, I would say it's certainly worth looking at every 50,000 miles or so.
Which is
especially if you have the
honestly-
supercharger off.
Yeah, that was my next point. Is we do recommend popping the supercharger off to look over your cores. So
Yeah.
that's all kind of, you take the supercharger off, you can check your ports at the same time.
And we do offer a nice tool to help do that with like walnut lasting media.
The cleaning, yep.
Mhm.
Yep.
Are your tunes for the B8 the same around the world? Would I be able to run the US tune in the UK on my car?
Well, yeah, I mean, we have a lot of different octane options available, and we have used our the underpinning on these ECUs is essentially the same worldwide. So
Yeah.
there are some minor differences in regions and how the software is set up, but the core tuning of the ECUs is identical worldwide from Audi or from so. You are able to use all of the same software, the same benefits, the same same magic we use here. It's going to work for you wherever you are.
Yeah, Awesome GTI is now our UK master distributor, and they're managing our entire ECU program as well for the UK. So if it's available in the UK, it's for UK cars as well.
Yep.
Audi's gotten better over the years. There used to be a lot more box code differences around the world.
There still is,
seem to
depending
be-
on some stuff. It seems to be it comes and goes. The MQB's got quite a few. The 3-liter, we had a couple of lucky breaks where there were some required software updates, like after the cars had all been released.
Yeah.
So it kind of pushed all of the cars up into very similar software for across S4, A6, Q5. So there it's almost identical software for everybody.
Yep. 2015 3.0 Q5. I always thought that shortening the operating range of an OEM strut with a shorter spring reduced the life of the strut. Is this the case with the 034? None of our springs, we believe, would reduce the operating life of the shock. The issue is when you really dump the car. So imagine here's a shock body, and inside the shock body is a valve. And that valve moves through hydraulic fluid, which creates a resistance. The resistance directly opposes the movement or energy in the spring to reduce the tendency of a spring to oscillate. So when the spring's pulling, the shock pushes. When the spring pushes, the shock pulls. And it's a directly opposed thing. Now, what happens when you lower the car? You move the valve down in the shock. If you lower it too much, then this valve is just going to be slamming into the bottom of the shock body. That will certainly be noticed in the ride and handling of the car. And this is why none of our springs dump the cars. And so what we're doing is we're finding the optimal point of how much can we lower the car and still keep the shock valving in its optimal operating range. Now, granted, we're moving it towards one end of the range, but it's still completely functional and what we would consider optimal.
We're not like whacking into bump stops.
Yeah.
Under any normal situations, you wouldn't hit them normally on a stock spring. And I mean and that's a really good point. The shock range is certainly one of the reasons we don't dump it, but it's also just even if you've got a shock that's modified to work or whatever in that range, it's still the geometry we try and optime.
Geometry.
Spring growth.
Yeah, we're balancing like 20 different things when we do this. So no, you're not going to see reduced shock life with our springs. Now, you would with other companies and brands that
if you're doing like a multi-inch drop on an S4 or something like that, you're going to be whacking into bump stops and crashing into things much more frequently.
Yeah, so you're going to feel, if this is happening to your car, you're going to feel something when you go into a corner and you really load up. Those outside shocks, you're going to just feel kind of almost like this hitching motion, which means that the suspension assembly is trying to compress more and it just can't because you're either down on the bump stops or the shock valve is bottoming out inside the strut housing. And so you'll feel kind of this hitching motion right at the limit of traction versus just loading up and then letting the car, the chassis dynamics do its thing. It's actually really bad for handling and it's very dangerous. But it also can damage, the shock valve.
Yeah.
The shock valving there is typically an internal bump stop that prevents catastrophic damage.
Metal, but it can only deal with so much.
The other thing is you'll feel is like when you're just going down the road and you're hitting bumps, you'll just feel like, when you hit a big bump, you'll just feel like the car almost like want to, that corner just jump in the air. And again, that's bottom.
And then there's 2 follow-up. It's something that's been posted on a forum in the last couple of days.
Yeah.
It's like, there's 2 more follow-up questions that
How many miles are on your shocks?
just coming up on 100,000.
So someone's asking, at what mileage would you proactively replace OEM shocks on a B8 S4 running 034 springs? Car has 100,000 miles, no major fluid leaking or extreme bounciness, but wondering when should replace for the best ride. When someone else says, if I'm at 94,000 miles, should I change the struts when installing your OEM springs? I think officially we would say you don't need to change them until you can determine that they've actually gone bad.
Yeah. The OEM struts are really high quality.
They're really good.
We've had really good luck with those, and you know, yeah. Aside from like, you know, some environments, and different salt and road conditions that can certainly wear a lot faster, but yeah, I haven't had any reason to swap ours out. It's been tracked a lot. It's been
Yeah, driven through.
driven a ton, and yeah, I'm at the
It's
same
been
thing.
babied or anything.
I'm at 100,000 on mine, and no reason I would be swapping these out anytime soon.
I think usually the best indication is there fluid leaking. That's what's mentioned.
Yeah,
Once the fluid starts leaking, then it's bad.
yeah, you may not see like fluid, but you'll start seeing just grimy mess. It'll be a really dusty, dirty looking strut, and that's just some weepage that maybe you don't see the fluid, but it's the after effect of it.
The other thing that happens, and then you won't see this from the outside, is that if the valving inside the shock either fails or degrades, then the shock won't have the correct damping. The fluid won't leak out. But for example, if you remove that valving, the shock shaft would just go in and out of the housing effortlessly because there would be no resistance inside. So, if you've got some extra money and you wanna feel that you're getting the best performance, I think putting new ones in at 100,000 definitely wouldn't hurt anything other than your pocketbook.
I would strongly recommend doing it with an OEM
Yeah,
shock. I wouldn't
Just replace the
go to an
OEM.
aftermarket and expect it to last as long.
yeah. And if you've got some extra money but not too much, then replace the fronts because those are doing a little bit more work than the rears. But no, I mean if you don't want to spend the money and the car feels like it rides and handles well, there's always the bounce test where you kind of push down on the fender and see how many cycles does it bounce. A good shock should dampen that within 1 or 2 cycles of you lifting off. This is not a scientific test.
Beware that test. It can be weird with mag ride shocks because they're not always energized.
They're
so
not energized.
That will alter how it works.
But I think if you don't feel like the car's bouncy or loosey goosey, going down the road,
You can
to use a
tell
technical
pretty
term.
quickly what a poorly dampened car. I mean, you're going to get these oscillations and just this never ending
Yeah.
boat ride down the road.
So here's the thing you can do with a buddy, if you'd like, is go down a stretch of road that's pretty bumpy and see if your buddy can get, even you could use a GoPro or something, but if they can film what your tires are doing as they go over those bumps. A good functioning shock will have relatively controlled movement of the tire over those bumps. So you'll see a bump hit the tire and you'll see the wheel and tire assembly react and then come to a rest really quickly. If you have a bad shock, you'll just see that tire just start bouncing like that off the road. Right. And I don't know if you've been on the freeway and you've seen someone next to you and then one of their front right tires just bouncing up and down
like
this.
massively bent wheel and a blown
That's just a completely blown shock. So, but again, if it's that bad, you would feel it. I think generally we're talking about automotive enthusiasts here. You're really in tune with what the car's doing. But we're not here to tell you to just waste your money. We're not about that. All right. Someone's asking, is there any point in breaking in the engine after new pistons? What do you recommend? Well, so here's my take on engine break-ins. The engine does need to be broken in, and there is a process you should go through to do it. However, if the engine's built properly, it will break in almost no matter what you do. If the engine hasn't been built properly, then it won't break in no matter what you do. So the key to break in is when the engine is built. But there is some things that we would typically do here. What we found is that engines break in extremely quickly, again, when they're built right. In fact, it could be in the first 30 seconds to a minute of it just running and idling, the piston rings will seat. So what happens when an engine breaks in is when you prepare the block, there's a honing process. And that honing process leaves actually a precisely rough finish on the cylinder walls. When you put in piston rings, it's kind of like when you put new pads on your car. The piston rings are manufactured to very precise tolerances, but the piston ring doesn't necessarily precisely match the cylinder wall. And we're talking about, micro measurements here. But you want that piston in contact with the cylinder wall in a very even fashion all the way around the piston.
The piston rings in contact. Yeah.
The piston ring. What did I say? Piston.
Piston.
Yeah, no, not the piston. The piston should never touch the cylinder. I mean, the skirts can, but they shouldn't. And so what happens is when you put a brand new motor together and you assemble it, you have, again, this crosshatch on your cylinder walls, and you have these brand new rings. As you start it and those pistons start moving through those bores, if the crosshatch is done properly, it will be just rough enough to wear those rings out relatively quickly, and make those rings conform precisely to the specific shape of each cylinder wall. If done correctly, the rings will perfectly conform to the cylinder wall of each cylinder, and those rings will maintain a very good seal under combustion pressure. In fact, more than 95%
Yeah.
of the pressure will stay in the combustion chamber.
And that's usually how we kind of we'll do a couple of tests throughout our break-in process. If we build a new motor, is we'll do a leak down test before and a compression test before, run it through a normal, either road or dyno break-in routine, change the oil, flush out clean all that up anyway. And then do another leak down compression and kind of determine where things are at. And you can usually see it pretty quickly where you'll have some pretty big variance across the motor from cylinder to cylinder. And as the brake for
A brand new motor.
completely undriven motor, and then after a pretty quick period, if it's breaking in properly, you'll see all those cylinders should level out compression and leak down wise, and you're usually good to go at that point.
So the one thing, and there's a lot of like snake oil and wives' tales about breaking in engines, and people have like superstitions and all kinds of BS around it. But what we will do is we will start the engine on a break-in oil. Break-in oil is actually an oil that has much lower lubrication and viscosity than you want, ultimately in the motor. But the lack of, or the less lubricative property of this oil allows the abrasion to happen between the cross hatching and the rings. And so we will start and run the motor on break-in oil, typically for some amount of time. Most of these end up on our dyno, and we would do the break-in on the dyno. But, I would say if you don't have a dyno, do a break-in, drive for 5 miles. And during that time when you're driving, I think it's important to not sit at 1 RPM. So you go out on the freeway, rev up to say 4,000 RPM. Again, you don't want to rev real high either during this period, but just rev up to like 4,000 RPM and then let off the throttle and let the engine pull down. And so that stresses the rings in both direction under acceleration and deceleration. And if you go out and you just do like a 1 mile loop and you come back to your shop, do a compression test at that point, your motor will be broken. There's no magic. You don't have to knock on anything or pray to any certain gods.
I've never seen a motor that needs anything more than
Well, we've seen motors that
there's some that never break in. That's what
and you could spend a week trying to break that thing.
And there's some people that say, oh, you drive 1,000 miles and then you're good to go. But I mean, if it takes 1,000 miles to break in a motor,
and
something's going on. Because I mean, could you imagine a factory motor? You can't drive the car properly for 1,000.
They don't really even break those in. They just come from the factory. You start.
I think they do some run cycles at the factory.
Maybe, yeah, sure.
I don't think it's any kind of extended amount of time.
So where you run into issues is if the ring gap isn't set properly, or if the cross hatching is not enough or too much. If it's not enough, it won't wear the rings enough and they'll never break in. If it's too much, it'll wear them too much, and then you'll be out of tolerance for the rings and then leak a lot. And then also, the size of the bore, the overbore over the size of the piston is critical, because that determines how much play there is between the rings.
Yep. And then, what the piston material and design is will change how much, how much that expands or grows and how much room there is between the piston and the walls. So, yeah, there's a lot that goes into it.
Not a lot of people building motors these days, but if you do,
Yeah,
I recommend working with a good shop, a good machine shop that knows what they're doing. That makes all the difference. So, All right. Someone is asking ETA DAZA Stage 2. It's done. So if you want to buy it, hit us.
No, we're shooting, I think, for next week. Is that right? Yeah, next week for all of the materials and whatnot to be able to
For a next week launch. So yes, it's all done.
Yep, and that'll be
We're
91.
just putting together all the advertising, marketing.
That'll be 91, 93, E85, and then both stock and the R injector upgrade.
All right, someone is asking. We got 10 minutes left. I have the Dogbone mount from CTS and get a lot of vibration. I have heard that your mount has no vibration. It's this totally different mount. Assuming you're talking about our Dogbone insert, we can't speak to the CTS one other than the fact that it's a copy of ours,
We don't know
which all of them on the market are at this point. But we have made revisions and changes to ours over the years. Obviously, I don't think CTS would have done that. We don't sell the same Dogbone now than we did 3-4 years ago when we released it. It's a cheap part. I'd recommend getting ours. It's the original. It's the best, most engineered part on the
Yep.
market. They're cheap, and again, we don't. It's not a part that causes a lot of vibration. You will notice some, but the only time I think we hear customers say there's a lot of vibration is it's not installed correctly.
Yeah, if it gets installed improperly and it can get twisted on install and kind of smash into the front and the back of the mount, and then you've basically kind of locked your mount together.
And it's really hard to install it wrong, but we sell thousands a year, and five people a year have an issue.
Yeah, and it really depends. How the most common issue is if your stock mount or your stock insert is pretty worn, it can tend front or back pretty heavily, where it's kind of smashed forward or back. And when you go to install the mount, you may grab some of that rubber and push it up versus sliding between the rubber pieces in that mount.
Yeah. Someone's asking, I know your throttle body kit is 84 mil, but the supercharger neck is 70 mil. Is there a benefit going bigger if you keep the supercharger stock size? Let me adjust this one real quick. So the throttle body blade is 84 millimeters, but keep in mind when that throttle opens, there's still a lot of stuff in the cross-sectional area. So you do need to oversize the throttle blade over the tubing that's before or after it. We will show and advertise proving gains with this product.
Yep. Yeah, we've got performance drops and the power gains there. I mean, we're talking pretty a pretty incremental change in things, but it's just one of those restrictions that's still there that we can address. That throttle plate, if you put it wide open and look down it, you're not looking down it. It's not an iris. It's not opening up.
No.
100%. You've got a shaft right across the middle of it that's interfering with the flow. So
that's a really good idea.
That's
the iris throttle body.
That's what
it's been done.
No, yeah. There's also been like sliding throttle body.
Yeah. So imagine you've got the throttle body, and a plate slides in and out from the side. Obviously, manufacturers don't use them for a reason.
A lot of bikes will use slide cylinders.
Yeah.
So they've actually got a cup and a cylinder that slides up and down as the air metering system. But
yeah, it would be like the camera aperture throttle.
Right. Yep.
But yeah, we should be releasing that soon. We're just waiting for our castle and housings to arrive.
Finally,
everything else is ready.
We made a couple of little tweaks after getting our first samples in,
and it is called the Super Duper Charger. Let's just make sure everyone knows that.
Right.
The Super Duper Charger. Does the 8V S3 have DSG difference between early 2017 and 2018 and later?
There's a difference. I'm trying to remember. I think it was 2018 and a half or right around there. They switched from the 6-speed to the 7-speed transmission.
So that's how you know.
Yeah, they went from the DQ250 to the DQ381.
Yeah.
I mean, that's functionally, as far as 99% of the population out there and what they're going to need out of the transmission, other than having the extra gear and the different gear ratios, they're going to perform and be able to deal with pretty much whatever most people.
Yeah.
There's not a fundamental shift where you would really want to search out one or the other.
Someone's asking, why do OEM B8S4 control arms fail? Audi uses a really, I would say, complex multi-link front suspension design.
Yeah.
And to be fair, those arms are asked to do a lot. They have to move and be flexible in multiple directions while being stiff enough to maintain the geometry of the suspension.
While trying to dampen everything they can out of the road, while
Yeah.
trying to they do a lot with those lower arms.
So it's you just have to look at it as it's a maintenance item, and they have to be replaced every so often. I think
And there's never been a control arm that hasn't been needed to be replaced. I mean,
they all have issues.
from Audi 4000s to 5000s to 200s to
That's
B5s to B8s, every single one of them. It's a moving part that's dealing with a lot of load in a lot of different ways. And
And you know, unlike Toyota Camrys, which just get driven around doing whatever, these Audis get a lot of performance driven focus and use, and so it does come with some wear and tear. Someone is asking, do your springs keep front camber within spec, or will adjustable front arms be needed? So whenever you lower the front suspension, it's going to change the camber. If there's no real way to design a spring and lower the car without changing the camber.
yeah, I got to look though within spec. I think mine's really close.
It's not far off.
Yeah.
It's within a range of the suspension geometry that provides a minimal camber change, but I'm gonna guess it's gonna give you a couple.
You're gonna get a little
tenths of a
camber out of
degree of camber, and it's within a range where you definitely don't necessarily need arms, and the extra kind of camber will give you more traction and handling benefits. Now, if our springs lowered a lot more than they do, then yes, there's all these compromises that you would have to start accepting. One of those would be a lot more camber, and we see this with the Hella Flush airbag guys who dump their car 4 inches and their front wheels are like this. Now they have 6 degrees of camber, and unfortunately, just the inside little part of their front tire is on the ground. But we're not talking about anything like that.
No.
Again, we take all these compromises into consideration. We work really hard to make some really good decisions about the ultimate result that you get. Is the DSG B8 versus B8.5 S4 that much different for reliability, smoother shifts, TCU tunes?
Not really. Not that I've come across and seen it. I've heard of or seen people have more issues on the earlier transmissions, and whether that's just a life aging out thing or not. Again, I've got 100,000 on mine, and the thing gets beat on. I'm on a B8, and it's thus far
They're reliable.
it's been rock solid. So
We have a service department here, so we see all the issues.
Every transmission in every car has got its Achilles heels. I've seen B8.5s that have had plenty of failed DSGs as much as the B8. So, I don't think there's anything fundamental that I've come across that I would say definitely go with this versus that. I've got a fairly early B8 that's been, really well on stock 100,000 mile trainings.
Yeah. All right, I think we have time for one last question. Is your B8 Super Duper throttle body aimed at only 190 mil dual pulley, or will there be gains with the 179?
It's just we're removing another or optimizing another restriction. It's you're gonna see some benefit across the board. It's not like you're gonna hit a hard limit and then you need to do this throttle body. It's just an optimization of a flow path that's there.
And our 179 pulley tune or whatever will support the.
Yeah, it's the same tune for the 179 or the 190. I'm a fan of running the smallest pulley or the smallest lower pulley you can to achieve what you're looking for. The bigger and the bigger you go with the pulleys, pulley ratios, you're fighting heat more and more and more, and it's not something you've got a lot of luxury with on the B8 intercoolers. So,
Yeah, the throttle body specifically gives a gain of power, and this is the same with all of them on the market in the upper range of the RPM band. So
yeah,
like
just
say
like
from
just like
6,000
an intake, just like you're removing a restriction on a certain amount of airflow, and that's gonna take effect or show effect more and more on the more air you're moving.
But below that RPM, there's enough flow from the stock throttle body that there's gains to be had.
Yep.
But at that certain flow volume, so the bigger pulley you run, the bigger gain you'll see. The more you get above that flow limit, the more gains you'll see by agreeing.
Given that you're able to run the exact same air temps and the same, so it's tough. It's a tough trade-off. There's no perfect all the power and none of the trade-offs.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us for another week here, and we appreciate guys asking all these great questions and listening to our answers. And we will be clipping out a lot of these on our YouTube channel if you'd like to check those out later on, or if you didn't see the whole thing. Of course, the whole Q&A also gets uploaded as well. So, thanks again, and we'll see you guys next week. Cheers.
Yep.